The crystalline towers of Velkar Prime stretched toward the violet sky like the fingers of ancient gods. And Queen Selithra stood at the highest balcony of her palace, watching the human ship descend through the clouds with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Her advisors had warned her about this day for months, telling her that the peace treaty demanded sacrifice, that the Galactic Concord would not accept anything less than a royal union between the Volcari Empire and the Human Systems Alliance. She had fought against it at first, arguing that her people had dominated 3 spiral arms of the galaxy through their psionic supremacy, that they had crushed civilizations far older than humanity, that they did not need to bow to the demands of lesser species, but the war had changed everything. 5 years of brutal conflict with the humans had ended not in victory, but in stalemate. And that fact alone kept Selithra awake at night, wondering how a species so young and so weak had managed to survive against her Empire's greatest warriors. The ship landed in the courtyard below, its design simple and functional compared to the elegant bioorganic vessels of her people. And the queen made her way down to greet her future husband with all the grace and coldness she could summon. Commander Marcus Cole stepped off the ramp alone, carrying nothing but a small bag over his shoulder, and Selithra felt her psionic senses reach out automatically to read his mind, to understand what kind of man the humans had sent to marry their greatest enemy. She found nothing remarkable. His thoughts were calm and organized, filled with simple observations about the architecture and the weather, and his memories showed an ordinary military career with nothing that suggested he was anyone of importance. Was tall for a human, but still shorter than most Velkari, with dark hair touched by gray at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. And when he smiled at her, she saw no fear or ambition in his expression. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing into Velkari fashion with surprising accuracy, "I am honored to meet you and grateful for this opportunity to bridge our peoples." His voice was soft and pleasant, carrying none of the aggression she had expected from a species known for their warfare. And Selithra found herself unsure how to respond to such genuine politeness. "Commander Cole," she replied, keeping her tone formal and distant, "you are welcome in my palace. Though I suspect neither of us chose this arrangement willingly." "Perhaps not," he agreed, and something flickered in his eyes that she could not read. "But I have learned that the best outcomes often come from situations we did not choose." The wedding ceremony took place 3 days later in the Grand Hall of Ancestors, where the crystalline walls displayed the images of every Velkari monarch for 10,000 years. And Selithra watched as Marcus endured the traditional rituals with patience that bordered on unsettling. The marking of submission required him to kneel for 6 hours while priests chanted in the old tongue. And he did so without complaint or visible discomfort. The trial of worth demanded that he answer questions about Velkari history and culture, questions designed to humiliate outsiders who could not possibly know the answers. Yet Marcus answered each one correctly, his pronunciation of their complex language nearly flawless. The binding of souls was meant to be the final humiliation, a psionic ritual where the queen would enter his mind and claim ownership of his thoughts. But when Selithra reached into his consciousness, she found something strange. His mind was not shielded in any way she recognized, yet she could not see beneath the surface, as if his thoughts were a still lake that reflected light but revealed nothing of its depth. She pulled back, disturbed but unwilling to show it, and completed the ceremony with the words that made him her consort in the eyes of her people. The court celebrated with barely concealed mockery, nobles whispering about the primitive human who had been sent as tribute, generals laughing about the biological weakness of a species that could not even develop psionic abilities. Marcus smiled through all of it, thanking those who insulted him with such genuine warmth that they could not tell if he was stupid or simply did not understand their contempt. General Keth Morn, the queen's most decorated warrior, approached Marcus during the feast with a goblet of ceremonial wine and a sneer on his elongated face. "Tell me, human," the general said loudly enough for the entire hall to hear, "how does it feel to know that your entire species could be destroyed by a single Valkyrie battle fleet? That your worlds are only safe because our queen has shown mercy?" Marcus took the goblet and sipped the wine thoughtfully before answering. "I think," he said, "that mercy is perhaps the greatest strength any civilization can possess. And I am grateful to serve a queen wise enough to understand that." The general sputtered, unsure whether he had been complimented or somehow outmaneuvered, and Silithra watched the exchange with growing interest in the weeks that followed. Marcus settled into palace life with an ease that surprised everyone, including himself. He spent his mornings in the royal gardens, learning the names of alien plants from the elderly caretakers who had never been addressed by anyone of noble status. He spent his afternoons studying in the great library, reading texts about Valkyrie, philosophy and art with the dedication of a scholar rather than a politician. He spent his evenings at court functions, always present, always polite, always somehow forgettable despite being the only human on the entire planet. Silithra found herself watching him more and more, noticing small details that did not match the image of a simple soldier. Sent as a peace offering, she noticed how he memorized the patrol routes of every guard. In the palace, after only 3 days, she noticed how he learned their written language faster than Valkyrie children, who spent years in study. She noticed how his heart rate never changed. Not when he was threatened, not when he was humiliated, not when he was alone and thought no one was watching one night. She summoned him to her private chambers, not for intimacy, but for answers, and Marcus came without hesitation, standing before her with that same calm expression he always wore. "What are you?" she asked directly, abandoning the careful games of court politics. He tilted his head slightly, and for just a moment, she thought she saw something move behind his eyes, something vast and cold and completely unlike the gentle man who tended her gardens. "I am your husband." "Your Majesty," he said softly, and his smile was warm and kind and revealed absolutely nothing. "I am whatever you need me to be." Silithra did not sleep that night, and when she looked out at the gardens the next morning, she saw Marcus kneeling among the flowers, his hands covered in soil, humming a tune from a world she had tried to conquer. She had wanted a trophy, a symbol of human submission. But she was beginning to suspect that she had invited something else entirely into her homes, something patient, something watching, something waiting. 3 months passed on Valkyrie Prime, and the crystalline palace became a place of whispered conspiracies and hidden daggers. Though Marcus Cole seemed oblivious to the danger growing around him, Prince Kethvorin, the Queen's younger brother, had always believed the throne should belong to him, and the arrival of a human consort gave him exactly the excuse he needed to challenge his sister's rule. "She has contaminated the royal bloodline," he told his allies in secret meetings that were not as secret as he believed. "She has shown weakness by accepting this treaty, and weakness cannot be allowed to sit on the throne of our ancestors." His supporters grew in number each week. Nobles who resented the peace with humanity, generals who had lost honor in a war that ended without victory, priests who spoke of ancient prophecies about the purity of Valkyrie blood. Silithra knew about her brother's schemes, of course, for she had spies in every corner of the palace. But she underestimated how quickly his rebellion was growing. She was distracted by something else entirely. Her human husband had become a puzzle she could not solve, and Silithra had never encountered a puzzle that resisted her brilliant mind for so long. Marcus continued his daily routines with perfect consistency, waking before dawn to meditate in the Eastern Tower, tending the gardens until midday, studying in the library until evening, attending court functions with that infuriating smile that revealed nothing But small incidents kept occurring that did not fit the pattern of a simple, harmless husband. One morning, Silithra found a noble from Kethvorn's faction dead in his chambers, apparently killed by a heart condition that no one knew he possessed. And Marcus had been seen walking near that corridor the night before. One evening, an assassin attempted to poison the queen's wine at dinner, but somehow the goblets were switched at the last moment, and the assassin drank his own poison while Marcus apologized for being clumsy with the table settings. One night, 3 warriors tried to ambush Marcus in the garden, planning to beat him as a message to the queen. But all 3 were found the next morning with broken bones and no memory of what had happened when questioned. Marcus expressed genuine concern for the injured warriors and suggested that perhaps they had fallen from the garden walls while intoxicated. Silithra did not believe him for a moment, but she could prove nothing, and her psionic scans continued to show only the calm, shallow thoughts of an ordinary man. Finally, she made a decision that would change everything. She summoned High Telepath Vermantis, the most powerful mind reader in the entire empire, a being so ancient and skilled that he had served her grandmother before her mother before her. "I need you to conduct a deep scan," she told him. "I need you to go beyond the surface and find what he is hiding." Vermantis was old and confident, certain that no mind in the galaxy could resist his probing, and he approached the task with the arrogance of someone who had broken 1,000 mental barriers. Marcus agreed to the scan without hesitation, sitting peacefully in the chamber of truth while the ancient telepath placed long fingers against his temples and began to push into the depths of his consciousness. At first, everything seemed normal. Vermantis passed through layers of ordinary memory, seeing Marcus as a child on Earth, as a young soldier in training, as a decorated officer receiving medals for courage under fire. But then he pushed deeper, past the surface memories, into the place where the true self resided, and he found nothing. Not emptiness, not darkness, but an absence so complete that Vermantis felt his own sense of reality begin to crack where there should have been a personality, a soul, a fundamental essence that made a being who they were. There was only a vast and terrible stillness, and in that stillness, something looked back at him. Vermantis screamed and ripped himself free from the connection, falling backward as blood poured from his nose and ears, his ancient body shaking with terror that he had not felt in centuries. "What did you see?" Silithra demanded, but the telepath could only whisper a warning before he fled from the chamber. "Do not make him remember," Vermantis said, his voice cracked and broken. "For all our sakes, do not make him remember what he really is." The ancient telepath requested immediate transfer to a distant colony world that same day, and Silithra never saw him again. She found Marcus in the garden that afternoon, kneeling among flowers that had no name in human language, his hands gentle as he tended to their alien beauty. "What happened to my telepath?" she asked, making no effort to hide her suspicion. Marcus looked up at her with those storm-gray eyes, and for just a moment, she saw something flicker in their depths, something cold and calculating that vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "I believe he saw something that frightened him," Marcus said softly. "The mind is a strange place, Your Majesty, and sometimes we bury things so deep that even we forget they exist. What are you hiding from me?" "I am a soldier," he replied, and his voice carried a weight that made her take a step backward without meaning to. Soldiers learn to compartmentalize trauma, to lock away the things they have done and seen so they can continue to function. And sometimes those locked doors should not be opened. That is not an answer. "No," he agreed, and something like sadness crossed his face. "It is not. And I am sorry that I cannot give you a better one." That night, Silithra accessed the sealed archives of the Human Systems Alliance, using diplomatic channels to request the military records of Commander Marcus Cole. What she received was almost entirely blank: his name, his rank, his date of birth, and then page after page of redacted information, blocked out by the highest levels of human security classification. The only readable notation was a single line at the bottom of the file. Asset reassigned to Prometheus Division. All further records sealed by order of the Alliance Council. She searched every database she could access, called in favors from intelligence contacts across the galaxy, and found nothing about Prometheus Division. It did not exist in any official record. It had never been mentioned in any intercepted communication. It was as if someone had erased it from reality itself. The Queen sat alone in her chambers as the moons rose over Volcara Prime, and she thought about the gentleman who tended her gardens, who learned her language with impossible speed, who smiled through insults and humiliation without ever losing his calm. She thought about the terror in Vermantis' eyes, the warning he had given before fleeing. She thought about her brother's growing rebellion, the danger closing in around her throne, and she made a decision. Whatever Marcus Cole truly was, he had protected her 3 times already, quietly and without seeking credit. And that loyalty was worth more than certainty. She would not push him to reveal his secrets. She would not make him remember. But when her brother finally made his move, when the coup she knew was coming finally arrived, she would watch very carefully to see what her husband would do. The answer came sooner than she expected. For even as she made her decision, Prince Kethvoran's fleet was already gathering in the outer system, and Marcus Cole, standing in the moonlit garden with soil still on his hands, looked up at the stars with eyes that suddenly seemed very old and very tired. I had hoped for more time, he whispered to no one. I had hoped I would not have to show her. The flowers around him swayed in the night wind, beautiful and fragile, and Marcus wondered if this was the last peaceful moment he would ever know. The night sky above Volcara Prime burned with the light of 100 warships, and Queen Salithra watched from her throne room as her brother's fleet descended upon the palace. Like a swarm of hungry predators, the attack came without warning, though she had known it was inevitable, and the speed of Kethvoran's assault left her royal guard scrambling to mount a defense that was already failing. Seal the doors, she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Protect the inner chambers and send word to the loyal fleets. But her orders came too late, for Kethvoran had planned this moment for months, bribing guards, sabotaging communications, ensuring that his sister would be isolated and alone when he finally made his move. The palace shook as landing craft crashed through the crystalline walls, disgorging hundreds of elite warriors wearing armor that glowed with psionic dampening technology. And Salithra felt her powers weaken as the devices activated throughout the building. She fought anyway, unleashing waves of mental energy that shattered the first attackers who reached her throne room, her eyes blazing with the violet light of her ancient bloodline. But there were too many of them, and her powers were fading with each passing moment. And soon she found herself surrounded by warriors who showed no fear of their queen. Prince Kethvoran walked through the carnage with a smile on his narrow face, stepping over the bodies of guards who had died defending their monarch. And he stopped before his sister with theatrical satisfaction. "Dear sister," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "how it pains me to see you reduced to this. But you left me no choice when you polluted our royal blood with human filth." Salithra spat at his feet, refusing to show fear even as soldiers forced her to her knees. "You are a traitor and a coward," she hissed, "and history will remember you as nothing more than a footnote in my reign." "History," Kethvoran laughed, "will be written by me, and I will ensure that your name is forgotten along with every trace of your shameful alliance with the humans." He turned to his commanders with a gesture of royal authority he had not yet earned. "Bring me the human," he ordered. "I want to execute him before his wife's eyes, to show the Empire what happens to those who defile our bloodline." The soldiers dragged Marcus Cole into the throne room moments later, his wrists bound by energy chains that hummed with restraining power. And Silithra felt her heart sink as she saw her husband forced to his knees beside her. He looked so ordinary in that moment, so helpless. Just a middle-aged human with gray at his temples and dirt still under his fingernails from the garden. Bathoran circled him like a predator examining wounded prey, enjoying the moment of triumph he had waited so long to taste. "Look at this creature," the prince announced to his followers. "This is what my sister chose over the glory of our empire. This weak and primitive being from a species that cannot even touch the psionic realm." He drew the ceremonial blade of their house, a weapon that had been used to execute enemies of the throne for 10,000 years. And he held it before Marcus's calm face. "Do you have any last words, human? Before I send you to whatever pathetic afterlife your kind believes in?" Marcus looked at the blade without apparent fear, then turned his head to meet Silithra's eyes across the throne room. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice soft and polite as always. "Do you want them alive, or does it not matter?" Silithra did not understand the question, could not comprehend why a man in chains about to be executed would ask such a thing. And she stared at him in confusion. Fona laughed, and what he assumed was the desperate babbling of a frightened mind. "How touching," the prince sneered. "Even at the end, he speaks nonsense to his queen." He raised the blade high, ready to bring it down in a killing stroke, and then Marcus moved. The energy chains did not break, because they had never actually held him, and the guards who had bound him were already falling before anyone understood what was happening. Marcus flowed through the throne room like water through cracks in stone, his movements so fast and precise that Silithra's enhanced eyes could barely follow them. The first warrior died without seeing the hand that killed him, his neck twisted at an impossible angle by fingers that knew exactly how much pressure to apply. The second and third fell together, their bodies collapsing as Marcus struck pressure points that no human should have known existed in Valkyrie anatomy. He did not use weapons, did not need them, for his entire body had become something more terrible than any blade. 4 warriors charged him with psionic lances blazing, and Marcus walked through their attacks as if the energy meant nothing, his expression never changing as he disabled them with surgical strikes to joints and nerve. Clusters 10 more fell in the next 30 seconds, their screams filling the throne room as bones shattered and tendons tore. With mechanical efficiency, Kevern screamed for his elite guard, the psionically enhanced warriors who had trained since birth to become living weapons. And a dozen of them surrounded Marcus with confidence born from a lifetime of victory. They lasted slightly longer than the regular soldiers. Marcus moved among them like a ghost, anticipating their attacks before they made them, exploiting weaknesses in their fighting styles that they had never known they possessed. When the last elite warrior fell, 47 of Kefvarin's soldiers lay broken on the floor, and less than 3 minutes had passed since the chains had fallen from Marcus's wrists. The prince backed away in terror, his ceremonial blade trembling in his grip, and he gathered every ounce of psionic power he possessed into a desperate attack. The mental blast that erupted from Kefvarin was powerful enough to liquefy a normal human brain, to reduce any organic mind to scattered fragments of consciousness. Marcus walked through it without slowing. He reached the prince in 3 calm steps and took the ceremonial blade from his shaking hand as easily as taking a toy from a child. Then, with the same precise efficiency he had shown throughout the battle, he broke both of Kefvarin's arms with 2 quick movements that left the prince screaming on the floor. The throne room fell silent except for the moans of wounded soldiers and the ragged breathing of those still conscious enough to witness what had happened. Marcus turned and walked back to where Silithra still knelt, surrounded by guards who no longer dared to touch her, and he lowered himself to one knee before his queen. The energy chains still hung from his wrists, their power meaning nothing to whatever he truly was. Apologies for the deception, Your Majesty, he said, and his voice was exactly as soft and polite as it had been on the day they met. What are your orders? Selithra stared at the man she had married, the man she had dismissed as a political trophy, the man who had just dismantled an elite army with his bare hands while showing less emotion than he did when pruning roses. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible even in the silence. What are you? Marcus looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw something honest in their depths. Not warmth, not coldness, but a terrible and ancient weariness that did not belong in any human face. That, he said quietly, is a conversation we should have in private. After we secure the palace and deal with your brother's remaining forces. He stood and offered her his hand. And Selithra realized that despite everything she had just witnessed, she was not afraid of him. She should have been terrified, should have seen him as the monster he had revealed himself to be. But she remembered the garden, the flowers he had tended, the way he had protected her without seeking recognition. She took his hand and rose to her feet. And together they began the work of reclaiming her empire. The coup ended within hours. And when the sun rose over Velkara Prime, Queen Selithra still held her throne, but everything else had changed. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity had sent more than a political trophy to marry the Velkari queen. They had sent a message, and Marcus Cole, standing in the blood-soaked throne room with soil still under his fingernails, wondered if his wife could ever look at him the same way again. The palace was quiet now, the bodies removed and the blood cleaned from the crystalline floors, and Queen Selithra sat alone in her private chambers, waiting for the husband she no longer recognized. Marcus arrived without escort, having refused the guard she had offered, and he stood before her with the same calm demeanor he had always worn. But she saw him differently now, could not unsee the way he had moved through her brother's army, like death itself, given human form. You promised me answers, she said, her voice steady despite the fear she refused to show. I think I have earned them. Marcus nodded slowly and took a seat across from her, an informality he had never presumed before. And she realized that the pretense of submission had ended along with Kethforin's coup. When humanity first reached the stars, he began, his voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. We discovered that we were children stumbling into a forest full of ancient predators. He looked at his hands, the same hands that had killed 47 elite warriors without apparent effort. Every species we encountered had something we lacked, some advantage that made them superior in ways we could not match through technology or numbers alone. The Velkari have their psionic abilities, Selithra said quietly. Yes. And the Kothari have their hive consciousness, and the Viren have their regeneration. And 100 other species have 100 other gifts that evolution or design had given them over millions of years. Marcus met her eyes, and she saw no deception in them now, only honesty that was almost painful to witness. Humanity had nothing but stubbornness and a willingness to change ourselves in ways that other species considered unthinkable. The Prometheus program, Selithra said, remembering the redacted files, a project that officially does not exist, funded by resources that officially were never allocated, staffed by scientists who officially died in various accidents throughout human space. He paused, and something that might have been grief crossed his face before the mask of calm returned. They asked for volunteers, people willing to become something other than human in service of human survival. And I was one of the first to raise my hand. What did they do to you? Everything, Marcus said simply. They restructured every neuron in my brain for pattern recognition and threat response, rebuilt every muscle fiber for maximum efficiency, Lace my bones with carbon structures stronger than your best alloys. He held up his hand, turning it slowly in the light. They removed my ability to feel pain unless I choose to feel it. Modified my digestive system to process almost any organic matter for energy. Enhanced my senses beyond anything a natural human could achieve. Selithra felt cold despite the warmth of her chambers. And the psionic resistance? My mind no longer functions like a normal consciousness, Marcus explained. There is no surface for telepaths to read, because there is no single unified self to read. Only a distributed network of processes that appear as stillness to outside observers. The telepath, she realized. Vermantis, what did he see when he looked deeper? Marcus was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. The transformation process destroys the original personality. Your Majesty, it has to, because no normal mind could integrate the changes without going mad. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. What your telepath saw was the absence where Marcus Cole used to be. The empty space where a man once existed before he was unmade and rebuilt into something useful. Then who are you? Selithra demanded, her voice cracking slightly. If the man I married does not exist, then what have I been living with for these past months? I am a reconstruction, Marcus said. After the transformation, candidates spend years building a new identity from the ground up, learning how to simulate normal human behavior, how to create a mask convincing enough to function in society. He finally looked at her again, and she saw something broken in his expression. The Marcus Cole you know is real in the sense that he is who I have chosen to become. But he is also a performance, a shell built around something that cannot be allowed to interact with the world directly. And what is beneath the shell? A weapon, he said flatly. A very efficient weapon that feels nothing, fears nothing, and exists only to protect humanity from the threats we knew would come. Selithra rose from her seat and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens that Marcus had tended with such care. And she tried to reconcile the gentle man who loved flowers with the killing machine that had destroyed her. Brother's army, why tell me this now? She asked without turning around. You could have maintained the deception, could have continued pretending to be harmless, because you asked, Marcus replied. And because I find that I do not wish to lie to you anymore. She heard him stand and approach, stopping a respectful distance behind her. I was prepared to live out my life as your forgotten political husband. Your Majesty, never revealing what I was, never giving humanity's enemies reason to fear what we have created. His voice softened in a way that seemed almost painful for him. But when Kethvarn threatened you, when I saw you on your knees before him, something happened that I did not expect. Selithra turned to face him. What? I did not want you to die, Marcus said, and genuine confusion colored his words. Not because your death would harm the Alliance, not because my mission required your survival, but because the thought of a galaxy without you in it caused me something that felt very much like pain. He shook his head slowly. I do not know if that feeling is a remnant of the man I used to be or something the weapon I became has somehow learned. But it is real, and I could not ignore it. Selithra studied him for a long moment. This impossible being who had been designed to feel nothing, yet stood before her, confessing to emotions he did not understand. You could kill me right now, she said quietly. You could kill everyone in this palace and escape before anyone knew what happened. Yes, Marcus agreed without hesitation, but you will not. No. Why? He was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been grief. Because I remember what it was like to love music, he said. I remember that I used to feel joy when I heard certain songs, that they moved something inside me that I cannot access anymore. He looked at her with eyes that were ancient and tired and desperately alone. I cannot feel that joy now. I cannot feel most things that make life worth living. But when I am with you, when I watch you rule with wisdom and strength, when I see the way you care for your people despite your coldness." He paused, searching for words that his transformed mind struggled to find. "I think I remember what it felt like to feel something. And that memory is the closest thing to happiness I have experienced since I stopped being human." Selithra crossed the distance between them and took his hand. The hand that had killed so many, and she felt it tremble slightly at her touch. "Then stay," she said. "Not as a weapon, not as a political trophy, but as my husband. You would want that?" he asked, and she heard genuine disbelief in his voice. "After knowing what I am? I want to know who you can become," she replied. "And I want to help you find out." She led him to the balcony where a traditional Valkyrie instrument sat unused since her childhood, and she began to play a morning song that her mother had taught her long ago. Marcus listened with his eyes closed, and something in his expression shifted, cracked, broke open just slightly. He could not feel the music the way he once had, but watching him try, watching him reach for something that had been taken from him, Selithra realized that he was more human than either of them had understood. The weapon was real, but so was the man struggling to exist within it, and she decided, in that moment, that she would help him find his way back to whatever remained of his soul. The Galactic Concord assembled on the neutral station of Meridian Prime, and representatives from 100 species gathered in the Great Chamber to discuss what had happened on Velkar Prime. They had all seen the footage, recordings captured by surveillance systems during Kethvoran's failed coup, and the images of a single human destroying an elite Velkari army had spread across the galaxy. Like wildfire, Queen Selithra arrived with Marcus at her side, and the chamber fell silent as they walked to the Velkari delegation's platform. She could feel the fear in the room, see it in the way representatives from species that had dismissed humanity for centuries now watched her husband with barely concealed terror high. Chancellor Verthex of the Kothari Collective spoke first, his insectoid voice clicking through the translation systems. "The Concord demands an explanation," he announced. "We demand to know what the human delegation has brought into our midst. What weapon they have unleashed upon a member world without warning or consent." The Human Systems Alliance ambassador, a calm woman named Director Chun, rose from her seat with practiced diplomatic grace. "Commander Cole is a decorated officer of the Human Alliance and the lawful consort of the Velkari Queen," she said smoothly. "His actions during the attempted coup were in defense of his wife and the legitimate government of an allied power." "That is not what we are asking," growled General Kethax of the Varan Dominion, his massive form leaning forward aggressively. "We are asking what he is, what humanity has created in secret while pretending to be a young and harmless species." Director Chun's expression did not change. "The specific capabilities of Alliance military personnel are classified information that we are not obligated to share under current treaty arrangements." The chamber erupted in angry voices, delegates demanding answers, threatening consequences. And Selithra watched as the galaxy's most powerful species revealed their fear of the quiet man standing beside her. Ambassador Silvex of the Mindari Concordat, a species known for their ancient wisdom and neutrality, raised a tentacle for silence. "Let us speak plainly," she said, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with the colors of serious discourse. "Many of us have suspected for years that humanity was hiding something, that their rapid rise and their survival against superior forces could not be explained by luck alone." She turned her massive eyes toward Marcus. "Now we have seen proof that our suspicions were correct. And we must ask, how many more like him are there, and what else has humanity been hiding?" Director Chun smiled, and something cold entered her expression. "The Alliance has been at peace with most of the Concord's member species for decades," she said carefully. "We have been good neighbors, fair trading partners. and reliable allies. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Perhaps the question you should be asking is not what we have been hiding, but why you have never been given reason to find out. The implication landed like a physical blow, and Selithra saw realization dawn on face after face. Throughout the chamber, humanity had been holding back, not from weakness, but from choice, and if one human could do what Marcus had done, then the full military might of the human alliance was something far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. General Kethax slammed his massive fist against his platform. "This is unacceptable," he roared. "Humanity has deceived the Concord, has hidden weapons of mass destruction in plain sight, has violated every principle of transparency that our alliance is built upon." He pointed at Marcus with a clawed finger. "I demand that the human delegation reveal the full scope of this Prometheus program, or face immediate consequences from the combined fleets of the Concord." Several other delegates voiced their agreement, and for a moment, the chamber seemed on the verge of declaring war against humanity itself. Then Queen Selithra stepped forward. "If I may address the Concord," she said, her voice carrying the authority of 10,000 years of Volcari rule. As the sovereign most directly affected by these events, the chamber quieted, all eyes turning to the queen, who had survived a coup with the help of a human weapon. "I have spent the past weeks learning the truth about my husband," she began. "I have learned what humanity created in secret, what they sacrificed to survive in a galaxy that offered them no mercy." She looked at Marcus, then back at the assembled delegates. They looked at us, at all of us, and they saw species with millennia of advancement, with psionic powers and hive minds and biological advantages that humanity could never naturally possess. Her voice grew stronger, more commanding, and instead of accepting their place as a lesser species, instead of waiting to be conquered or destroyed, they asked themselves what they were willing to become to survive. She gestured at Marcus, who stood motionless beside her. This man gave up everything that made him human, surrendered his personality, his emotions, his very soul, so that his species would have a chance against beings who saw them as nothing more than primitive newcomers to be exploited. Selith returned to face the delegates directly. "You ask what humanity has been hiding, what weapons they have created in secret, and you demand answers as if you had a right to know." Her eyes blazed with violet light as her psionic presence filled the chamber. "But I ask you this. Which of your species has not developed weapons in secret? Which of your empires has not hidden advantages from potential enemies? Which of you would have shown mercy to humanity if you had known they were truly defenseless?" The chamber was silent, delegates unable to meet her gaze. Humanity did what any species would do when faced with extinction. She continued. "They adapted, they changed, they became something that could survive. And they did it so well that none of us ever suspected." She took Marcus's hand, holding it before the assembly. "I have seen the cost of that survival. I have seen what my husband sacrificed to become what he is. And I tell you now that it was not done with malice or aggression." Her voice softened but lost none of its power. "It was done with fear. The same fear that any of us would feel if we were alone in a hostile galaxy with no natural advantages." She released Marcus's hand and stepped forward, addressing the entire Concord. "The Velkari Empire will not demand answers from humanity, will not threaten war over secrets that every species in this chamber has kept at one time or another." Her declaration sent shockwaves through the assembly. "Instead, I announce today that the Volcari Empire will formalize a full alliance with the Human Systems Alliance. Not a treaty of convenience, but a genuine partnership between equals." Murmurs of shock and outrage filled the chamber, but Selithra raised her hand for silence. "You fear what humanity can become," she said, her voice ringing through the great hall. "I have seen it with my own eyes. I have watched my husband walk through psionic fire and break an army with his bare hands. She paused, letting her words sink in, and I tell you now, pray that they remain our friends. For I cannot imagine facing them as enemies. The summit ended without resolution. The Concord unable to agree on how to respond to these revelations. But the galaxy had changed in ways that could not be undone. Humanity was no longer the young species to be pitied or exploited. They were the species that had looked at the universe and said, if we cannot match you, we will become something worse. The journey home was quiet, and Marcus stood at the viewport of the royal ship. Watching the stars pass in streaks of light, Selithra found him there, his reflection ghost-like against the infinite darkness of space. You did not have to defend us, he said without turning. It may have cost you allies, weakened your position in the Concord. I told the truth, she replied, standing beside him. And the truth was worth any cost. They watched the stars together in comfortable silence. What happens now? Marcus asked finally. Now we go home, Selithra said, and you continue tending your garden, and I continue ruling my empire, and together we figure out what comes next. That's simple? Nothing about this is simple, she admitted. But I find that I prefer complicated challenges to easy certainties. Marcus turned to look at her, and she saw something new in his eyes. Something that had not been there before. Hope, perhaps, or the memory of hope. They landed on Velkar Prime as the sun set over the crystalline towers, and Marcus went directly to the garden he had built over months of patient work. The flowers were blooming now, dozens of species from a dozen worlds growing together in harmony, and he knelt among them with the same gentle care he had always shown. Selithra watched from the balcony above. This weapon who tended flowers, this monster who had saved her life, this broken man who was slowly learning to feel again. She descended to join him, and together they worked in the soil as the stars came out overhead. Are you happy? She asked him as the moons rose. Marcus was quiet for a long time, his hands moving automatically through familiar tasks, and when he finally answered, his voice was thick with emotion. He had thought himself incapable of feeling. I do not know if I can be happy, he said honestly. I do not know if that capacity still exists within me. He looked at her, and she saw tears gathering in eyes that should not have been able to cry. But when I am here, with you, in this garden we have built together. He paused, searching for words that his rebuilt mind struggled to form. I think I remember what it felt like, and that memory grows stronger every day. Selithra took his hand, and for a being who could kill every creature in the palace without effort,